Cool figure T. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know, I'm your humble host, the Yamin of Revolution. We got a World War III update. Iran destroys U.S. bases as Trump continues attacks. But before we get into that, y'all be sure to wipe y'all. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Salute. Let's get right into the content.
The Iranian armed forces announced that in response to the American attacks, including the strike on the Shalamcheh border crossing in Iran on Wednesday night, several military facilities used by U.S. forces in Kuwait had been targeted. Iran released images of the attack on multiple U.S. military bases on Thursday, July 23, 2026, showing the launch of Qatar, Ahmad, Khaibar Shekin, Fata 1, and Hajj Qasim medium-range ballistic missiles, as well as Pava cruise missiles, and Shahed 136 ammunition, aimed at the military installations and bases of attackers. A professor at the University of Miami and a geopolitical analyst, responding to Trump's latest threat of attacks on Iranian bridges and power plants, said, "Equality is their disease. The Iranians cannot allow someone to threaten them openly without responding," said Mohammad Marandi. In a statement broadcast by Iranian state television, the Iranian armed forces stated that the U.S. Army's ammunition and logistics warehouses at Camp Doha, the fuel tanks at Ali Al Salem Air Base, and the Camp Arifian ammunition depot in Kuwait had been targeted using drones. In the early morning Iranian attack, a thick plume of smoke rose and stretched for a radius of approximately 10 kilometers from the Ali Al Salem Air Base area. This was triggered by a massive fire caused by explosions after incoming Iranian projectiles fell and hit a series of objects. Analysis of low-resolution satellite imagery verified the extent of damage to the base's infrastructure following today's Iranian strike. The affected facilities showed several buildings, identified as barracks complexes housing U.S. military personnel, were reportedly destroyed by the projectiles. At least 5 military housing units were destroyed, but no casualties were officially reported by the U.S. Meanwhile, at the U.S. military base Camp Buehring, the latest Sentinel-2 satellite imagery captured today shows what appears to be damage to a helicopter shelter and ammunition and weapons storage. The air control tower at Camp Buehring was also attacked and damaged, devoting this operation to civilian casualties struck by U.S. airstrikes last night, IRGC reported. Additionally, thick black smoke billowed over an open area near a telecommunications tower on the Abdali border between Iraq and Kuwait following the explosion. But no authorities have yet confirmed the cause, target, or damage. Claims linking the incident to an Iranian attack remain unverified. Marandi added, "Kuwait will be the first country to fall, and this will happen very soon. Iran will not limit itself to Kuwait, but will continue its attacks. It is time to evacuate people from Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, and perhaps even Oman. Trump will not be able to stop Iran because that requires realism and an understanding of history, not denial, illusion, and delusion." The Aerospace Force of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched heavy missile and drone attacks on U.S. bases in Jordan under Operation Nasser 2 Wave 25, with King Faisal Base and Prince Hassan Base being attacked in the initial wave. The military released footage on July 22, 2026, showing a diverse arsenal of missiles using solid and liquid fuel, hitting U.S. bases in the region during the latest consecutive attacks. According to an IRGC statement, the attacks were in response to repeated U.S. acts of aggression, including recent air and missile attacks on Iranian military and civilian centers. Reported targets and damage included: an F-15 maintenance hangar was attacked, a drone preparation hangar was attacked, 8 new MQ-9 Reaper drones were completely destroyed before assembly, and 2 additional MQ-9 outside the hangar were heavily damaged. A helicopter storage hangar was attacked, causing major damage to 2 heavy U.S. helicopters. Personnel housing facilities were targeted, resulting in a number of casualties and injuries to the attacking forces. Satellite imagery dated July 22 appears to confirm IRGC reports, showing an aircraft hangar at King Faisal Air Base after today's IRGC attack, which destroyed at least 1 aircraft warehouse. The hangar was left burning, with plumes of black smoke billowing from the site, indicating that an aircraft inside was disabled, with sources close to the impact saying it hit an F-15. Several other reports claim that aircraft such as C-130 transport planes, fighter jets or helicopters previously parked in the surrounding area appear to have been evacuated. The base in Jordan appears to be evacuating its U.S. Air Force assets after today's IRGC strike. IRGC asserted that these punitive operations are continuing, warning that if the U.S. aggression is not halted, Iran is prepared to carry out regret-inducing operations that will force public mourning in America.
The Red Sea is effectively closed as the Houthis, aligned with Iran, have shut down the Bab el-Mandab Strait, and they took out 2 Saudi Arabian tankers. The Strait of Hormuz is effectively shut down as the Iranian IRGC has effectively shut down the United States route in the southern area by Oman, and Iran struck another tanker yesterday. You have crude at now $95 a barrel. There was a dignified transfer in Dover, Delaware yesterday, and Donald Trump used that opportunity to falsely claim that the service members before they died said that they never wanted Iran to get a hold of a nuclear weapon, and Donald Trump refused to so much as even bow his head during the dignified transfer ceremony. And what is Donald Trump doing at 12 a.m., at 12:30 a.m., while the Red Sea is now shut down, as crude approaches $100 a barrel, as the American people are suffering? What did this psycho post last night? The following. He reposted an account, Republican Party News, siren alert, everybody. The president of the United States wants to communicate something while the United States is in this catastrophic and unlawful war, and while wars have broken out across the world. as a result of Donald Trump's weakness and his corruption and his pathetic behavior and his warmongering. What could he be posting, everybody? This is what he posted. Holy crap. Dana White says it best. Trump is the ultimate American badass of all time. I have never known a human being like him in my entire life. Fire emoji, American flag emoji. It's no wonder that even 37% of his MAGA base is all that supports his catastrophic and unlawful war against Iran at this point. Trump has lost all support right now, and the polls show that he has never been less popular, the least popular in presidential history. So that's what he's posting at 12:30 a.m. What he's trying to conjure some sympathy for him. He's making that post from July 2024. This, as the New York Times is reporting, a military official told the Times that nearly a dozen troops were also wounded severely enough by Iranian missile and drone attacks in Jordan and other countries this month that they were flown to a U.S. military hospital in Germany for treatment. Now, I'm glad last night the New York Times was finally getting around to report that. But as you know, beginning late last week, we were showing you these medevac planes. Remember the videos we were doing here, casualties being hidden. We were tracing the medevac planes that were taking off from the Middle East, and they were winding up in Germany, where there are hospitals to treat our service members. And we were talking about how there were obviously very serious injuries that were taking place. We've been showing you the satellite footage and a lot of the surveillance footage that shows the containerized barracks where our troops are hoarded by the Trump regime and not protected, as the U.S. interceptors are really no longer working. And we've shown you those barracks being destroyed. Remember the Trump regime officials, CENTCOM, which has become another clown show. Of course, the Department of Defense, which is even worse than another clown show. No offense to clown shows, because some clown shows are actually interesting. These are fascist loser clown shows, the ones I'm talking about. But to be very clear, they said these were only minor concussions caused by ballistic missiles and Shahed drones. First off, minor concussions is kind of an internally contradictory statement. And no, these were very serious injuries, traumatic brain injuries and other very serious injuries taking place. I believe that the actual casualty number is in the thousands. I think we'll look back at this and say, obviously, it was somewhere in the multiple of thousands. And I believe the fatality number is higher than what they're saying. The Trump regime is trying to also be like, well, if you were killed in Erbil, Iraq, that's not necessarily directly related to Epic Fury. And so I want to put a little asterisk right here. We'll come back to this video, of course. Donald Trump was in Dover, Delaware. Again, you can see all of our military leaders putting their head down as a sign of respect for those killed in action. Donald Trump was, again, lying about what they were saying and refused to so much as bow his head. But what he did do in Dover, Delaware, is post Trump orders, this was a post from Donald Trump, Trump orders CENTCOM to open the gates of hell after U.S. troops killed. Launches strikes on Iran. Open the gates of hell. Well, after the 12th consecutive escalation night by the Trump regime, attacking civilian areas in Iran, including an area in the Iran-Iraq border, where there were hundreds of pilgrims right there who were traveling for religious reasons, and the Trump regime struck the pilgrimage at the border. And we had video of that I showed yesterday. While you have the Trump regime striking more civilian infrastructure in Iran, Iran struck back as it said it was going to do. Iran struck a ship that was trying to go through the southern route in the Strait of Hormuz by Oman. The Houthis, obviously allied with Iran in the Red Sea, shot two tankers, 2 Saudi Arabian tankers and about 6 to 8 other tankers turned around in the Bab el-Mandab. Great work, Donald Trump. Not only is the Strait of Hormuz shut down, but the Red Sea is now shut down. Also, 3 other tankers turned around in the Strait of Hormuz. But CENTCOM, which I said before has become this utter clown show, posted that it is false. They wanted to do a fact check over at CENTCOM. Claim today Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy claimed that it controls the exit and entry to the Strait of Hormuz, suggesting that the international mariners can only use routes the IRGC prefers. This is false. Fact. Iran does not control the Strait of Hormuz, says CENTCOM. We all know it's very safe. These are some sick people at CENTCOM also. I used to have some hope. I mean, obviously not recently, but at least several months ago. Okay, CENTCOM will be normal, despite how horrible Trump and Hegseth and this sick regime, this disgusting, vile regime is. At least CENTCOM will be normal. Nope. CENTCOM. Fact, Iran does not control the Strait of Hormuz. The international waterway remains open for transit regardless of IRGC threats and attacks. Commercial vessels continue to use the strait with U.S. military support. Since early May, American forces have helped more than 900 ships transit the strait. In other words, sounds like a fabulous place to take a vacation through the Strait of Hormuz, according to CENTCOM. By the way, most of those ships did not use the southern route that the CENTCOM wants the ships to take by Oman. Most of those ships refer to the IRGC route. But in any event, what the CENTCOM numbers are actually reflecting, even if you accept them as true, even if you accept that all those ships went through the CENTCOM southern route after the U.S. violated Section 5 of the MOU, which said that Iran administers the Strait of Hormuz, even if you said, okay, it's open, everybody. Well, that averages about 11 ships per day, which is less than 10% of the pre-war volume. The art of the deal, by their own numbers, which are inaccurate, the Trump regime is doing only 10% of what was taking place before. In other words, the arsonists want credit for not putting out the fire, but for putting out a single little tiny flame while the fire rages and says, can I get a freaking participation trophy, right? I mean, this whole MAGA movement that's like, we're so against the woke participation trophies and all this BS. Literally, Donald Trump wants a new participation trophy every day. I solved 8 wars, everybody. I solved 10 wars. No, you've lit the world on fire, and there are wars throughout the entire world right now. You take a look at some of the latest polling, and people are absolutely livid at this disgusting thing, this disgusting creature in the Oval Office. Late night, Donald Trump may be trying to post polls showing Darlene Graham, Lindsey Graham's sister, now leading, according to, what are they even citing? Kalshi, according to Kalshi. Okay, we know that Donald Trump's the guy who runs Donald Trump's scripts. He's got he got busted. You teleprompter. He got busted with the Kalshi betting. By the way, so Trump's posting Kalshi at late last night about Darlene Graham. Meanwhile, what the Fox poll, I'll do a whole other video on the Fox poll, but the latest Fox poll says that Democrats can better handle income inequality, 22 points. Healthcare, Democrats lead 21 points. Inflation, Democrats by 10 points. The economy, Democrats by 9 points. Foreign policy, the Democrats by 7 points. Republicans still hold an advantage of crime, while government spending, Democrats are up. And actually on immigration, Democrats are up by 1 point on the issue of immigration right now. Now, you have Democrats leading by a significant margin heading into the midterms, the biggest lead of any party since Fox has been doing this poll since 1996. Well, why don't we hear from some of those Trump voters, see how happy they are right now? Here were some Trump voters. Hat tip to Jen Psaki and the folks over at MS Now for this one. Take a listen to what these 3-time Trump voters and others have to be saying. Play this clip.
This war has been it's been taxing on everyone, and I'm on the fixed income, and so it's other ones that on fixed income I'm really feeling it.
You could talk directly to the president. We know he likes to watch TV. What would you tell him about this war?
President Trump, you shouldn't have got us in this war and was going to end it fast, soon. And now you're starting all over again.
Has the war helped your life at all?
No. For one thing, it causes me angst, makes me angry. And as I said, I'm very disillusioned. My entire family is disillusioned. And we are and were Trump supporters, but this is, to me, he's drawn a line in the sand. And that's how I feel. That's how we all feel.
What about Bill O'Reilly? What did Bill O'Reilly? Bill O'Reilly's like, hey, Donald, you need to take some time off, bud. Bud, take some time off. Take like a month and a half off. You are constantly hunching. You're hunching all the time, Donald. You can't speak in sentences, and you are very dangerous and deranged. Take some time off, says Bill O'Reilly. This is what Bill O'Reilly says. Here, play this clip right here.
Final thought of the day. As you know, I've known the president 35 years, and he's 80 years old right now. Okay, so that puts him, if I can do the math quickly, 45, maybe early 40s when I met him in New York City. Now, I've noticed that he is hunching over a little bit, and that's normal. You get older, every malady in the world is going to visit you. I can't even bore you with the stuff I got to deal with. And I was actually feeling sorry for myself the other day. I never do that. But I mean, this and that, a blood test, that. But I noticed the president was a little. So my advice to Donald Trump is to take the next month off if you can. Get into an environment where you like golf and relax a little bit. You got to deal with Iran. I understand that. Everybody understands it. But you can do that on the phone, and you can do that with your people coming, but need a breather. I need a breather, and I'm going to build it into August. But he needs a breather much more than I do. Okay, so we wish the best for not only President Trump, but all the presidents, even Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Jimmy Carter, always respected the office. I did, always. If you read Confronting the Presidents, you know that.
Utterly deranged regime indeed. Now, we really got to be paying attention to the Bab el-Mandab Strait as well, because it's basically the main way that Saudi Arabia brings out its crude carriers. It's crude through these very large crude carriers, these VLCCs. It's how they get out their most of their oil exports get out that way. And now the Houthis have shut that down. But Donald Trump also, the art of the deal. He has only maintained the security umbrella in the Middle East for Netanyahu. They have the Iron Dome, while all the other Arab nations are just getting absolutely ripped to shreds where the U.S. military bases are by Iran. I guess the Arab nations are finding out that they were actually the first line of defense for the real Iron Dome, which was actually Israel, and that they were basically being thrown in there as the shield to guard Israel, which is something that Iran is pointing out as it knocks out these military bases in these Arab nations. But, when you do all these quid pro quos with Saudi Arabia and UAE, time to pay up there, Donald, time to pay up. So as Saudi Arabia's economy is now absolutely suffering, as their tankers are getting hit, Donald Trump says, hey, MBS, you scratched my back, so we're going to allow you to do some nuclear enrichment. How about that? We'll give you the ability to get nuclear weapons, as I saw this account say. MAGA when enriching uranium. Iran, we want to enrich uranium. Donald Trump, no, you're a terrorist. You're fired, you're a terrorist. Saudi Arabia, we did 9/11 and we want to enrich uranium. You want to give me money? Okay, you can do whatever you want there. Sure. I mean, it's just the most ridiculous thing. Oh, and United Arab Emirates, guess what they get? They get our classified semiconductor chips, which they'll just turn around and likely give to China. UAE bought a lot of Trump crypto, World Liberty Financial. Abu Dhabi, Dubai, putting lots of money in the Trump family pockets right there. Time to pay up, Donald. Again, with all of this going on, you've got these Trump regime top officials like Dan Scavino posting these videos of what the Oval Office looks like right now. I mean, the Oval Office literally looks like a dog that pissed on the same white mailbox over and over again. It's literally just like Donald Trump's, freaking piss all over the Oval Office. Excuse the imagery, but it literally looks disgusting. And speaking of disgusting, here's Donald Trump yesterday saying that he calls it, we don't need no Hormuz Street, Donald Trump says. We don't need no Hormuz Street. Here, let's play this clip of what he said.
We don't need anything. We don't need the Hormuz Street, but we do it because we have to do it, because we cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. It's very...
Also, Donald Trump referred to the catastrophic and unlawful war as a skirmish. He said that Iran, they're begging me to make a deal. They want to do a deal. Deal. I'm Donald Trump. I just say deal. I do a deal. Dude, shut the hell up with saying the freaking word deal, you loser. Deal makers don't go around, deal, I did a deal. No, you're a loser. You've escalated this catastrophic war. Iran is picking off U.S. bases one by one right now. And then they up the ante, and now through the Houthis control the Red Sea, you idiot. Crude's going up. America is suffering, and this is the stupid crap that you say in Georgia at some small gymnasium there. Anybody clapping for this, man, so utterly repulsive to me also. Here, play this clip.
And the stock market has said, and that's with this skirmish we have going on. I call it a skirmish. This is with this skirmish we have with the Islamic Republic of Iran, and I call it that because, let me tell you, they're getting hit so hard. And they want to make a deal. But I say they're not ready to make a deal. Because every time they make a deal, they want to change it and everything. They're not ready. They'll be ready very soon. And this is despite this. It's going on. The stock market has hit 73 all-time highs since the election. Think of that.
Now, the Wall Street Journal also reporting the U.S. is surging forces, medics, and weaponry in the Middle East right now. 150 medics have arrived in the regional medical center in Germany in recent days. I wonder why that is. Also, according to Politico, the White House is at maximum level of frustration right now. The only way to victory that he wants is completely and politically impossible. What politics of it? How about you stop killing our young men and women that you're putting in harm's way and having them be basically targets right there for, in your catastrophic and unlawful war? Let me leave us with this right here. Here's what AOC said. With all of this as background, you've got AOC saying, and now the Trump regime wants to label everybody communists. Like what, Bolsheviks and communists? What are you doing? And I think AOC has a pretty good perspective on all of this. Let's play this clip.
Trump Republicans continue, they will use the word communism over and over again. They'll say that don't call it democratic socialism. How do you see it? Do you think that the use of the word communism over and over again has been effective in terms of going up against the DSA?
I mean, I think that, so the administration has rather openly admitted that they are seeking to usher in a new McCarthyism for this era. Their only way in a time of deep unpopularity is to try to stoke fear and new conspiracies. And so they're trying to inject conversations about communism in order to scare people. But at the end of the day, the thing that's most important are the policies that we believe in. I believe in guaranteeing health care to every American. I believe in raising the minimum wage. I believe in strong unions. And so, if a Republican wants to call a stronger union communist, they're more than welcome to do that. I'm not going to be deterred.
Yeah, and as I listened to that clip of AOC, I also reflect on this headline: Don Jr.'s investment
the infrastructure of these countries.
So for The View from Iran, we are now joined by Professor Syed Mohammad Marandi of the University of Tehran. Great to see you again, sir.
Good to see you, sir.
Thank you both for inviting me. It's always a great pleasure.
Of course. So we have a fresh Trump Truth Social for you to react to here. We don't even have the element made yet, so I'll read it to you. It says, a year ago, the United States of America attacked very powerfully the Houthis for their interference with commerce and trade by shooting at ships. Since that time, and during our conflict with Iran, they have acted very responsibly. Unfortunately, now they are starting up again, shooting at 2 Saudi Arabian ships last night. Please let this truth serve to represent that if they do this again, the U.S. will hold Iran responsible in that the Houthis are a surrogate and or proxy of Iran. Major military punishment will be inflicted upon Iran. And of course, the Houthis themselves, who I am very disappointed with in that they have until now acted very professionally and smart. Your reaction to that, sir?
Well, we are already on Trump's list, even as he's waging war against the country. He said that any ship that's hit or even fired upon in the Strait of Hormuz, in response, the United States will take out a power plant or a bridge. Well, last night, 3 ships tried to pass through the Strait of Hormuz without the permission of the Iranian Navy, and one of them was struck and the other 2 retreated. So far, Trump has not carried out his threat. Of course, the Iranians have said that if he does so, then those countries in the Persian Gulf that are complicit in this war, their critical infrastructure will be destroyed. And we know what that would mean in the month of July in the Arabian Peninsula. That would effectively mean that these countries would have to be evacuated. Now, Ansarullah has its own grievances. The Yemen, or the Houthis, as they say in the West, the Saudis have led a siege on their country for years. And they see this as the best moment to have leverage because the Strait of Hormuz is closed. So they said, we're going to shut the Red Sea to Saudi Arabia until they lift the siege. And the United States waged war against Yemen. The United States did not succeed. So far, the United States in its war against Iran has not succeeded. If Trump wants to fight 2 wars simultaneously against these 2 entities that he could not defeat, I don't think the result will be victory.
Professor, I'm curious for your reaction here about the ongoing diplomatic posture in Tehran. We can put A4 up here on the screen. Your foreign minister put this statement out yesterday. Our defense doctrine is clear, an eye for an eye. Any aggression against Iran, including our infrastructure, will compel a powerful and decisive response. Those who contribute to such aggression, whatever kind of support, will also be considered as legitimate targets. So if I pair this with some of the comments I've seen you make recently publicly going after many of these Gulf regimes, which are hosts, of course, to our bases. What can we expect if Trump does follow through with this threat of bombing civilian infrastructure, specifically bridges and energy targets around the capital city? Where will likely Iranian retaliation come?
Well, if we go back to the 40-day war, the Ramadan war, back then, the Israeli regime and the United States, they began targeting Iranian critical infrastructure. And one strike was on the South Pars gas field, the biggest gas field in Iran, which is a joint field with Qatar. And the Iranian response, because the Iranians had warned back then that they do the same thing, that they would strike back at the critical infrastructure of those countries that are hosting the U.S., that are enabling the U.S. to attack Iran and the U.S. and the Israeli regime. So they struck back very hard, including striking at the Qatari gas facilities. And then Trump, right afterwards, put up a Truth Social statement saying that this is not going to happen again and Netanyahu is not going to do this anymore. So that was Iran's deterrence. And a few days ago, when the Americans, as you recall, they started bombing Iranian bridges and tunnels, all civilian, and killing people who were on the bridge, including families, women, and children. Well, I'm not sure about children, but I do know about women. The Iranians threatened the United States and said that if you continue, we're going to strike back at the infrastructure. And the U.S. also hit a desalination plant and a hospital in the city of Ahvaz, a children's hospital. So Iran I'm sure you recall, struck Kuwait's the electrical grid and a desalination plant to basically say that, look, take this threat seriously.
Mhm.
And since then, the United States has sort of backed off, even though last night they did strike the border between Iran and Iraq, killing 2 pilgrims, which I don't know why they did that. But in general, the United States has backed off. So the Iranian threat is real, and the Iranians will go and destroy the infrastructure of these countries because they don't have access to U.S. infrastructure in the United States, so they're going to do it here. Now, if that happens, you both know exactly what that will mean. That will mean that the energy markets will be wrecked permanently, or at least for years to come. Because if Iran destroys the critical infrastructure in these countries, which are all deserts, and we're in the month of July, these countries will have to be evacuated, and that includes Saudi Arabia. The countries will fall apart. And that means that there will be no more energy for months, if not years to come. And that will lead to a global economic depression worse than the 1930s. This is not something that Iran wants. Iran didn't start the war. Iran didn't escalate. Iran didn't threaten to target critical infrastructure, but this is Iran's deterrence. They will do this, but they're saying they will do this so that Trump does not move in that direction.
Okay.
Professor, President Trump has claimed that Iran is begging to talk. I don't think there's any reason to take those claims seriously, but I am curious what the attitude within Iran, as far as you can glean, towards negotiations and diplomacy is at this point.
Well, we all know that he was saying this throughout this war. He's been saying it so many times. I don't know how many times exactly, but tens of times. And, in Iran, there's actually a different type of debate. There is a divide in Iran between those who think that the MOU was the right thing to do and those who said that we should not have signed the MOU and we should have just continued until things got worse for the United States. Both sides have an argument to make. I mean, those who were in favor of the MOU, they said, well, we took advantage of the first few days. We exported tens of millions of barrels of oil and imported critical supplies to prepare ourselves for the next phase because we knew that the United States would not abide by the MOU. And those who oppose it were saying, no, we should have continued. They were in bad shape and we should have just put more pressure on. The debate is not, let's negotiate now. No one is saying that. So the debate today is, and both sides have arguments to make, and I'm not in any particular camp myself. I think both have good arguments to make. But the point is that the talk is whether we should have been hitting harder and being more assertive rather than pursuing the policy that we did in the past. No one now is talking about negotiations.
Well, the curious thing, sir, I saw that you had said during the memorandum of understanding period, if you could say that there was some sort of understanding, is you were mimicking some of the rhetoric of our vice president, say that you were taking the opportunity to reload. So was this always the course of action that was in the minds of many of these Iranian leaders? And now that we are back in a phase where, some hot war has resumed, what would it take to resume the memorandum of understanding?
The Iranian leaders did not believe that the United States would abide by the MOU. And if they had, the Iranians would have fulfilled their side of the bargain, no doubt. The Iranian intention was there. And that's how it's been in the past. With the JCPOA, that's how it was. And it would have been the same today. But the Iranians knew that, at least those who I know, in the different political camps, they all believed that the United States would not abide by its commitments. And it became pretty clear after 3-4 days. They did not hand over the stolen assets. They did not force the Israeli regime to leave Lebanon. Trump continued to threaten Iranian officials and the Iranian people, which is a violation of the deal. They expanded the sanctions regime, another violation. They removed the sanctions on oil exports, then reversed that after a few days, another violation. And of course, they, in violation of Article 5, they went and set up their own parallel corridor in the Strait of Hormuz, because in Article 5, Iran was supposed to manage the strait. So what the Americans were trying to do is to try to take control of the strait take away Iran's leverage and then not carry out its obligations and win a war that they could not win on the battlefield or through siege warfare. So, and then they bombed Iran when Iran ultimately, after a couple of weeks of warning the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Americans not to do this, the Iranians finally struck 3 ships, I think, and then the Americans waged war against Iran again, another violation, and reimposed the siege. So the Iranians knew that was happening, but the difference between Iran and the United States was that the Iranians were willing to implement the deal, but not the Americans. But the Iranians, they took that opportunity to export a lot of oil and to import critical supplies to prepare them for the next phase. But I think that ultimately, if the United States, the Iranians are not in the mood for negotiations, but if the United States wants to solve the problem, I think that the MOU will not be enough for Iran. They will demand that the United States first carries out certain things before the Iranians do anything, and they will also be explicit in including Yemen and Gaza in the negotiations. That's my guess.
Gaza too. Very interesting. Retired General Keith Kellogg, who has held a variety of roles both in the first and the second Trump administrations, took to Fox News to push for a significant escalation. This is A7, guys. Let's go ahead and play this.
Here is a concern I do have for Iran, though. You have played sports. I've played sports. We've watched sports. And you let a team hang around, a baseball team in the 9th inning or a football team in the 4th quarter, where you were clearly the better team. You should have closed them out in the 1st quarter, not the 4th, or the 1st inning, not the 9th inning. And the longer they stick around, the more dangerous they become. And that's kind of where we're at right now. And I think the president's going to close it out. He should close it out. There's a few things he should do, I think. One is on negotiations. Let's not negotiate. I'm not negotiating with these guys. We're going to dictate the terms of the war, and it is a war that's going on right now. We're going to keep taking out their leadership. The whole policy about decapitation, we need to continue that. If that means taking out Bahidi or Arachi or anybody else like that, that's fine, because it destabilizes the regime. The other part, because it gives you leverage, is I would take the islands of Karg Island and Larak Island, which is like, it's further to the east, but it's like the command and control center of the Gulf. And you take them to give the president leverage. Now I own something you don't have anymore. We'll give it back to you at the end of this war if you need it, or we're just going to keep it forever. The other thing I think we should be doing is, look, let's go, and if it takes a presidential finding or something like that, let's start figuring out how we can help the Iranian people organize the resistance against the theocratic regime.
So, Professor Trump, in addition to that on Fox News, very influential, and this particular individual also very influential, Trump has directly said he plans to attack Pickaxe Mountain. I'm wondering, from your perspective within Iran, what people are sort of expecting Trump's next move to be.
Well, first of all, I'd like to point out that I'm really surprised that he was a general. I fought in war, but I was just an ordinary volunteer and foot soldier. What strategic value would Karg Island have? How is it a command and control center? It's a flat piece of land which has, I mean, right now Iran is not exporting oil because there's a siege. So if they take it, it's a flat island, and the Iranians will just simply start hammering it day and night and kill U.S. troops. And so is that going to stop Iran? I mean, right now, Iran is striking U.S. bases in Jordan. That's like 1,000 kilometers away, or in Western Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. So why does Iran need to be standing alongside the shores of the Persian Gulf or the Strait of Hormuz to block ships? This is not like the 18th century. It's not even the 20th century. This is the 21st century. It's the era of missiles and drones. So if Iran can hit U.S. bases in Jordan and destroy their key assets, or in Saudi Arabia or elsewhere, then what purpose would it have for them to carry out this sort of attack? I find it amazing that he ever became a general at all. But I think the most important thing here for me is that if this war expands, first of all, if the global economy collapses, that means the U.S. economy will collapse. And I think that the United States will have to withdraw, not just from our region, but from across the globe. A global economic depression will mean that we will all lose jobs will be lost, businesses will collapse, factories will shut down, there won't be money, insecurity everywhere. I don't think he quite comprehends what that means for the globe. Tens of millions of people, perhaps maybe hundreds of millions of people will be on the move. I mean, imagine, let's say, Latin America, people losing their livelihoods. Where are they going to go? I mean, North America may not be any better, but people will still go to North America. It's sort of like the grapes of wrath, where people went to California, moved towards California, even though things weren't all that great over there either. So I don't think they quite comprehend what that means. And there's another factor as well. Yemen is now in the fight. The resistance in Iraq is larger than the resistance in Lebanon. They have at least 150,000, maybe 200,000 people right now prepared to fight, and they're well armed. So you have Iran, you have the resistance in Iraq, you have Yemen. Who does the United States have? It has like what, Bahrain? It has the Emirates. I mean, do they even have a fighting force? And now Saudi Arabia it can't export oil. These are countries that are literally almost 100% dependent on oil or gas. They're deserts. And if their critical infrastructure is destroyed, then tens of millions of people will have to leave the Arabian Peninsula. Again, I don't think he quite understands what an all-out war means. And they already tried that anyway with Iran. I mean, you can't get higher than Ayatollah Khamenei. They martyred him. Nothing. We didn't have a leader for 2 weeks because the assembly that chooses the leader in accordance with the Constitution couldn't gather together for 2 weeks because of the strikes. So for 2 weeks, we didn't have a leader. We had a council in accordance with the Constitution, but still they fought back. The streets were being cleaned at night. People were going to supermarkets. No one emptied the shelves of supermarkets. So why does he even think that if they try that again, it's going to succeed? The only difference is that if they go after Iran's critical infrastructure this time round, Iran is going to do the same. And we're going to literally be living in a completely different world if that happens.
Yeah. Well, Professor Morandi, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.
President Trump gives another warning to the Houthis. How dare they stop the Bab al-Mandab? But don't worry, the Strait of Hormuz is open. And by the way, we may be getting ready to go back to full combat, and that will finally teach those darn Iranians a lesson. Now, what could possibly go wrong with that? It's not as though we've tried all of those things before and had spectacular failure, but why would that get in the way of trying the same thing over and over again? Try to put some finer nuances on this and try to figure out what exactly is going on, and is it really going to succeed? We have Colonel Doug McGregor back with us today, defense and foreign policy analyst, former advisor to the Secretary of Defense, and of course, highly decorated combat veteran. Doug, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Dan, I love the way you put it. We're going to teach them Iranians the final lesson.
I think the accent is what really gets it. That's where that's what'll get us into the success. And you can almost hear that tone when you read this Truth Social by Trump this morning, where he says, a year ago, the United States of America attacked very powerfully the Houthis for their interference in commerce and trade by shooting at ships. Since that time and during our conflict with Iran, they have acted very responsibly. Unfortunately, now they are starting up again, shooting at 2 Saudi Arabia ships last night. Please let this truth serve to represent that if they do this again, the U.S. will hold Iran responsible in that the Houthis are a surrogate or proxy of Iran, and major punishment will be inflicted upon Iran. And of course, I'm very disappointed in what they have been doing. And I'm sure that last part there is really going to get to the Houthis. Is no, now that they know that President Trump is disappointed in them, I'm sure that they'll start letting the ships go through. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's time for Daddy Trump to spank them Iranians and also them Houthis. You know, this is the craziest sort of bizarre war I've ever seen. You know, I lived through the Vietnam War. I watched all those nightly newscasts and so forth. And then obviously I paid a great deal of attention during the time I was on active duty. I've never seen this kind of public rhetoric from a president, anyone in power in Washington, that we've seen from Trump. And I think it's counterproductive. I think a number of things are happening. And let me back away from the battle space for a second and point out that oil has now reached $90 a barrel and continues to rise. And I predict it will hit $150 a barrel within the next 30 to 60 days and then rise further. Also, the bond yield on the 10-year bond is up to 4.7%. The reason that's important is all the people that work in the bond markets, Jeffrey Gundlach, I'm trying to think, Luke Groman, there's several out there, will tell you that once we hit 5%, we can no longer service our debt. And we have to understand that that interest rate is not set by the Fed necessarily. The market sets it. What the market is saying is foreigners are not going to invest in us. The people that normally would buy our debt won't buy it. The reason I'm bringing all of this up is that we may reach a point where Mr. Bessent, who is as important in all of this as, let us say, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs right now, Kane and Hegseth, will walk in and say, look, boss, we can't print any more money. That won't extricate us from this emergency. In other words, they will have moved in this shell game the problem too many different places, too many times. They can't go on anymore. So the first thing to understand is that this is a race between, on the one side, our rapid financial crisis spinning out of control and our economy plummeting, and this so-called war with Iran of air and missile power. And the question is, which one gives way first? And I think the air and missile power war could conceivably outlast the financial crisis. But the point is, once you hit the financial crisis, everything stops. So what we're seeing right now from Iran is a very methodical approach to targeting. And they're targeting the things they said they would. And they're going after the statelets. Great thing. And note that Kuwait in particular has been a very, very popular target for Iran. And I predict when this war ends, whenever it does, that Kuwait will cease to exist. It'll simply become part of Iraq, which is kind of interesting given that we fought a war to prevent that, did we not?
I was thinking that very thing, actually, yes.
And then
how ironic it was.
Stateless, you see the same thing. They're going after those things, but we also have the shaping operation, which is to prepare Israel for attack. Their assumption is that they'll have to go back and attack Israel because Israel's not going to sit there quietly. At some point, there will be another resumption of operations there. And I think it's very clear the Iranians want to systematically remove all the radars and all the missile batteries and so forth. And the same thing is true up and down the coast, from across from Karg Island all the way down to Chabahar. So that, the opportunity, unfortunately, for some kind of land operation seems very real.
Well, as a matter of fact, that is starting to become more and more spoken. We had Professor Morandi on yesterday, who did not hesitate to say he thought that maybe not Iran per se, but the resistance fighters in Iraq could move on Kuwait. He said that openly. The Houthis in Saudi Arabia, in the southwestern corner of Saudi Arabia, could move in. And then here, this just in the last, I guess this was just last night, the resistance affairs experts, the rulers of Arab countries should know that Iran has no fear of conducting ground operations against them. I was looking this morning at some of the targets that have been hit overnight, and I've noticed a lot more are being hit on border control points in Kuwait, which makes it look more and more like something's coming. The fact that they're talking about this openly on Iranian television, that seems to imply that there is serious possibility to that. Now, that would seem just out of the ordinary. Iran is just trying to hunker down and survive, but now there's actually talk that they may go on a ground offensive. Do they have that capability?
Yes, they have the capability to overwhelm not just Kuwait, but they could go after the other Emirates. Remember, the only thing that really stood between the various statelets in the Gulf and Iran for years was American military power. We essentially picked up the British mission. The British mission, after they created these little statelets, was to ensure that the oil states would be protected so that the oil would flow freely down through the Persian Gulf, up through the Suez, and then off to Europe and Great Britain. So that makes perfect sense. And the Arabs have demonstrated pretty conclusively, I'm talking about the people in the Arabian Peninsula and certainly in the Gulf, that they're not really capable of protecting themselves, or they're not willing to. And now we have this public discussion of a potential arrangement with Saudi Arabia to provide nuclear materials. I mean, this is just astonishing. It's almost as though we're not satisfied to come to some sort of arrangement with Iran. We want to blow the entire region up. And obviously, we've turned to the Kurds in the hopes of mobilizing them. And I think the Iranians have skillfully eliminated any platforms or bases in Iraq or Syria from which the Kurds could launch against Iran. And I know that the Turks have been helpful to the Iranians in that regard. They've helped them target the Kurds. Both the Turks and the Iranians share the same interest, suppressing the Kurds, preventing them from helping to tear the region apart.
Yeah, in fact, there's been a lot of bombing up in this quadrant here of late on the near Erbil and where a lot of the Kurdish areas are here, and also inside this territory, as far I think even into Syria, but because Iran has been going after those. And I just wanted to go after here. This is the territory of Kuwait right here. And at least what Professor Morandi is suggesting, that there could potentially be some movement here in the south, and one wonders also from the southeast. What do you know about what capabilities Kuwait has to defend itself on the ground?
Nothing significant. I mean, they purchased some equipment from us. I don't know how much of it is operational. I don't know how resolute the people inside the Kuwaiti defense establishment are. The other thing is that they've started hitting some of these desalination plants, or I guess desalination plants. I don't remember how many there are, 5, 6, 7, but you begin to destroy those. You have roughly 5 million people living there, depending upon these desalination plants. So it could end up being a situation where if they went in on the ground, and it would definitely come out of Iraq, there might not be much there to meet them.
And you know what? I was just thinking, even about our time in that, our combat in that, not far from those locations there. And when I went back to Iraq in 2009, I think I did spend some time at Camp Bering in Kuwait, doing some training in not far from where that map I was just showing you. And I remember there are, unless something has happened that I'm not aware of, there were literally no defenses up to the north. This is not like the Russia-Ukraine war where there's all these intricate fortifications and trenches and whatever else. It's just wide open desert you can drive through. And what would be the military capacity of, let's say, I mean, we're just hypothetical speaking here. Let's say that these alleged 150,000 resistance fighters from Shia in Iraq, which are ostensibly part of the Iraqi security forces, so actually part of the state, if they broke away and said, no, we're going to move on here, if from what you know, how hard would that task be for Kuwait to defend?
I think it's almost impossible. I know that King Abdullah from Jordan is now in the United Kingdom somewhere. That may be an indication of where things are headed in Jordan in the near future. I would imagine that the Al-Sabah family has packed its bags and headed to London or somewhere else. You know, all of these places in the Gulf are very weak. These are not strong, cohesive societies. They don't maintain effective military establishments. We were looking a few years ago at what the average private in the UAE ground force is paid. I think it was something like the equivalent of $80,000 a year, plus, whatever benefits are involved with that. Can you imagine that? And are you expecting these people that spend half of their day lying around at home, relaxing, and only spend perhaps half a day on active duty? I just don't see that happening. I don't see them doing much of anything. Everything is dependent upon us.
I also remember you and I were in the 2nd U.S. Cavalry in 1990. We were in Grafenwehr Training Center doing a lot of training and exercises against what we thought was going to be a potential Soviet foe when, on August the 2nd of 1990, Saddam Hussein did invade into Kuwait and rolled all the way through in basically a day and set up his forces on the southern side there. But at that time, we had a couple of divisions, and I think George Bush sent the 101st and maybe the 82nd. I can't remember exactly who it was, but light fighters basically to put a presence there. And then we all started moved up, and we had, I think, somewhere around 750,000 in the Army at that time, and all of our forces could go from Germany at that time and deploy into the 7th Corps. We went in there. Does such a force exist now? If anyone, whether Iran and or Iraq forces do that, can we do a Desert Storm 2 type operation today?
Well, obviously not. We were lucky that Saddam Hussein, frankly, made the decision he did to effectively attack us. If it hadn't been for his decision to attack, I don't know that we'd have had much of an army, frankly, Dan, to fight with. If you recall, we had at the time almost 800,000 men in the United States Army. The Army was in a drawdown, and you had multiple divisions that had to be stripped out to bring the divisions we sent up to full strength. We weren't really ready, but the good news was that at least those of us who came from Europe were probably, I think, arguably in a higher state of training. But nevertheless, we were overtrained for the task, as you know, and we were very fortunate.
And what would happen if President Trump today was tempted to say, if an invasion happens, to say, I'm going to do my own Desert Storm and I'm going to move a bunch of troops over there? Can we do that?
No, first of all, we live in a new world today, and you could never build a lodgment unless you had enormous quantities of air and missile defense that you could surround the so-called lodgment area where you would collect and organize and assemble forces. And at the time, one of the things that we discussed privately was if we ever have to come back again in the future, given the direction of technology, we'd probably have to land in a place like Yanbu on the Red Sea and then cross the desert. Because if we tried to get into the Persian Gulf, we would be sunk or attacked or killed pretty rapidly. A lot of people realized, I think more people realized the danger that would be presented in the future than we appreciate right now. Admiral Zabrowski certainly understood that, as did the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs, whose name escapes me at the moment. But there were people that were thinking this through. But ultimately, Dan, I think the real lesson is this: even though there were smart people at the helm, nothing really changed inside the force.
And you talk about if we land in Yanbu, which is about right there on the map there, that would be 1,000 kilometers that we would have to travel just to get to the battle space area right there, as opposed to when you and I went in, we went to Al Jabail, which was right here. That would be literally impossible right now with all of the Iranian firepower that they have all up and down this coast, for us to try and disembark with ro-ro ships and container ships to get our tanks and whatever else off the board here just to drive up to Kuwait. That would be nearly impossible right now. In fact, it might be absolutely impossible. What do you think?
Completely, without question. No doubt about it. And, the tanks are still equipped with these turbine engines. And those things, as you know, drank fuel. And even though you have this auxiliary power unit that's supposed to reduce the amount of fuel that you consume, if you're moving, it doesn't make any difference how fast you move. You consume the gas at roughly, I think it was 8 hours, 7.5 to 8 hours, and you're on empty. That's 7 or 8 hours of operation. You can't fight a war that way. That's why the notion of committing these forces in a place like Ukraine is absurd. Ukraine is enormous. You go a couple of 100 miles and everybody's standing around waiting for tons of fuel to arrive. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, and in fact, it doesn't. Whether it makes sense or not, we just don't have that capability anymore. So if that happens, the whole system is so much more vulnerable than it was in 1991. It's remarkable how less capable we are today. And I don't think President Trump keeps saying, and Secretary Hicks said 2 days ago, repeated, we're the most powerful military on the planet, and yet we couldn't even do a Desert Storm 2 because of our limited capability. That's the reality of it.
Well, Dan, you got what is it? An echo or something? You got an echo? Okay.
I don't hear an echo. I don't. If you do, I'm not sure about that.
Is that? Yeah, I think this. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine. I have no problem hearing you.
Yeah, I think we have to understand that it's civilians in general, particularly people who are members of Congress, they're very impressed with glitz and glamour, shock and awe. You show them videotapes of explosions. They equate an explosion on the ground with an effect that is a war-winning effect. There's no understanding of how complex warfare is and the need for multiple capabilities being employed and orchestrated as an integrated force. There's just no understanding of that at all. So everybody is in the hunt for a silver bullet. Everybody wants to buy the silver bullet that will win the war. And we're finding out that there are no silver bullets unless you want to go the nuclear route. And we should talk about that because I think that's being discussed too.
And, let's take a look there, Doug, because you say it's complex. Well, apparently for most in Washington, it's actually not complex at all. It's kind of easy. It's just about a bunch of cash. And here we have a $1.5 trillion defense budget was passed by the House, and that was a little bit deceptive. We're going to talk about what the internal parts of that are here shortly. But just looking at the top line number here, 1.15 trillion, but that's also in addition to 350 billion, of which it was just for somatic, so it didn't look as 1.5 trillion, going from 1 to 1.5 trillion, which is just astronomical. But Congress is really happy with that. And also turns out that money equals capability. And General Jack Keane says, you know what? Let's just go and use that force and finish the job.
We are on a definite path to return to major combat operations that would involve Israel and the United States. I think that is the path we're on. Is there some negotiations that the Iranians want to do here? Of course, they want to negotiate. Why now? They want to negotiate because they want to stop the United States from imposing their will by firing on them and taking away their military capabilities. They want to stop that, as they did successfully back on April the 7th and April the 8th. They want to replay that. I don't believe that's going to happen. Pakistanis and Qataris are supporting him on that, but I don't think that's where the president is and his team around him. I believe where they are frustrated, they want to get the Straits of Hormuz eventually open and also return to major combat operations and finish what they started out to do in terms of assigned military objectives.
So that's all we got to do, Doug. Just got to go and finish the job here. What say you?
Well, he said some very important things that the audience needs to note. First of all, he led off his discussion with Israel. Dan, this entire war is about Israel and the interest of its agents in the United States, its lobby, its supporters, the Zionist billionaires, whatever you want to call them. That's what this is about. This is not about the United States of America. Contrary to popular belief, Iran is not and never has been an existential threat to us. And if you go back and pick through all the series of supposedly horrific things the Iranians have done to us, they all shrink to insignificance next to the war that we encouraged Iraq to fight against Iran that cost Iranians somewhere between 500,000 and 700,000 dead and perhaps 1 million casualties. Nobody brings it up. We set it up. We equipped Saddam Hussein. We sent him into action. This is long before we went after Saddam. And this is a big problem. This is not about our interests. We have no interest in attacking Iran. Remember, it was the attack on Iran by the United States and Israel that has caused the Gulf to be closed. It was open until we attacked. Now, suddenly, everything that we talked about in the past, the nuclear development and capability, and bringing, Iran to the table, all this kind of nonsense, that's all taking a back seat to control of the Persian Gulf. That's where we are, and that's what we're focused on. And until that resolves itself, we're not going to move on to very much else. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not interested in destroying whatever infrastructure is out there that supports the One Belt, One Road. These are the Chinese rail lines and so forth, the connectivity to Russia, because Iran has a very important role to play in the One Belt, One Road that China has started. But having said that, this is really preeminently, first and foremost, about Israel. And Americans just have to get that through their heads because they ought to be asking why. And, you flashed across this defense bill, and in the new defense authorization bill, there is this integration of Israeli force, let's call it force development or technological development, and American technological development in a purely military context. And I think Larry Wilkerson said it best. I think it was early this morning, or could have been yesterday afternoon. He said, what we're doing is that we're making what Pollard, the Israeli spy who ratted us out to all sorts of people, legal. In other words, what he did, for which he was sentenced to life imprisonment, is effectively being legitimated and legalized by this defense authorization bill. Americans ought to be very concerned about that. And I don't think most Americans even appreciate what it means.
Yeah, I'm very sure that a lot of them don't. I mean, that's many are starting to. Thomas Massey, of course, led the charge to try from within to try to get this thing stripped out. He obviously failed because 100%, I believe it was nearly 100% of the Republicans were supportive of that bill in the House of Representatives, and about half of the Democrats were. So there's still an overwhelming number of people who were still subservient to whatever the Israeli side, no matter what they're talking about with the intelligence and the military tying together of the two sides. And I just wonder if you could just on a practical level, just talk about that for a second, because we have had, this claim that, we gain a lot from Israel. We have had other good allies too, since World War II, Great Britain, France, Japan, Germany, UK, obviously, and yet we have never even contemplated joining our militaries to them, no matter how good our relationship has been. Why? I mean, this is probably a loaded question, but why do you suppose we're talking about doing that with this tiny little country of Israel when we won't do that to our advantage, potentially, with any of these other allies?
Well, the other allies have not invested billions of dollars in the campaigns of members of the House and the Senate. Whereas people in the House and the Senate stand to benefit directly and indirectly from these arrangements. It's effectively, on one hand, they're benefiting because they get money from the Zionist billionaires representing the Israeli lobby. And they're also going to be rewarded for supporting the Israeli lobby in the form of kickbacks that are funneled back through their districts and states and so forth. So the financial dimension is unambiguous. It's very real. Again, we're just legislating and legitimating treason for all intents and purposes. We're saying this is all right. Now, why would they do that? Because most of them don't think it matters. They don't trace anything. They don't care about it. They need to understand the Israelis are certainly not above, and have done so in the past, selling our technology to the Chinese or the Russians or to any number of other people for the right price. So the Israelis are very, let us say, open-minded about any technology that they receive from us. We don't seem to care about that because we just don't think it matters. It won't have any impact on us. And they're wrong. And what we don't seem to understand is that technologies that were once a monopoly of American military power are now widespread and proliferating, in part because of Israel and other states. So this is not the time to be careless. But money has a special meaning. Greed is endless. Washington, I sometimes describe it as this enormous mountain-like feature that is entirely composed of cash. And people come here to dig into the mountain, fill up every wheelbarrow and bag they can with as much cash as possible before they quit and go home again.
Well, that's an interesting analogy. We're talking about all these mountains that we can't penetrate with missiles in Iran, and there's this cash mountain we also, regular people can't penetrate either. We'll see where that goes. But you said people aren't talking about this. At least one person is talking about it a lot, and that is Tucker Carlson.
The entire House of Representatives, every Republican but 7 today, minutes ago, just voted to merge the U.S. military, the $1.5 trillion a year U.S. military, with the tiny reserve force, IDF. Does that help us? No, of course it helps them. Merge American intelligence, the 19 intel agencies, with Mossad. What? Of course. Basically a humiliation ritual. Whatever you want, Israel. If it hurts us, that's fine. Actually, it feels good to sacrifice for you. It's like everyone in the entire government is Mike Huckabee now.
Wow, that last part there. Everyone's Mike. Hard to argue with that because Mike Huckabee on paper is the U.S. ambassador to Israel, but definitely he is the Israeli mouthpiece to America, no matter what his title is. Hard to argue with much Tucker said there.
No, I think Tucker's essentially correct. The difference, of course, is that Tucker has 24-hour-a-day security to protect him, and he needs it. That's how dangerous it is for him to speak publicly and say these things. That doesn't mean it isn't risky for others, but we don't have that kind of security. The interesting part is that none of this had to be this way. During World War II, we were very sensitive to the information, the intelligence, and the things that we gave to the British. In fact, sadly, FDR was much more ready to support the communists in the Soviet Union, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union that was fighting the West. At that time, Hitler, and before Hitler, it was prepared to fight us as well, obviously. As a result, people subsequently, after World War II, when they discovered these things, I mean, they discovered, for instance, that in January of 1945, we shipped a very large portion of plutonium, enriched uranium, to the Soviet Union. And this is something that FDR authorized through Harry Hopkins. People couldn't believe it, but it happened. It should never have happened, but he signed off on it. We did nothing like that for the British under any circumstances. So this is not the first time, but it's not going to be advantageous for us. It will redound to our disadvantage. And I just can't even begin to imagine how bad it can get. Right now, things are bad enough with this pointless, unnecessary war against Iran.
Well, and that's actually, I want to jump back to that because there are some continuing developments even today. We talked just a second ago that because of what has happened in the Bab el-Mandab and the Red Sea, that and the Houthi attack of a couple of ships yesterday caused the price to go back up to over $100 a barrel. That's the paper price, though. But let's show you the actual practical impact at the point. This is live right here. This is the spot price for oil. This is what, when anybody fills up a tanker and they buy a physical barrel of oil, not the paper, this is what it's trading at right now, $140 a barrel. And that's what has the impact on our our economy, because economic activity is based on the amount of energy you have. And so when you have to pay that much for energy, then the commensurate price of your economic output will also rise. It's not the $100 barrel, as bad as that is. It's $140, which can only go up. What concerns do you have about what impact that's going to have on our economy as especially if Jack Keene's advice is taken there and we end up going back to full-scale operations?
Well, you're talking about the difference between the paper price and the real price, and it's very important, and you're right. I said earlier that it's going to go to $150 within the next 30 days or so. I'm talking about the gap between the two is going to narrow. One is going to catch up with the other. And when that catches up, it has a huge impact. Not only is no one interested in buying our debt at this point, and that's a big problem because that's part of the system that backs the petrodollar. In addition to that, we're going to see these treasury interest rates rise. When that 10-year hits 5%, all you have to do is run the numbers, run the math. We cannot service the debt. The debt, remember, is already as large as the defense budget. In other words, the payments, it's going to go well beyond that. I think there's something else too that people don't understand. When you have cheap energy, you also usually have cheap credit. Now, cheap credit means that you're paying very little for new money. Right now, that's drying up quickly. As your position weakens financially, the cheap credit dries up. When you can't get cheap credit, you can't afford real credit. My point is that could crash the entire economy. Our whole financial system could collapse. And in the meantime, remember that you have China, which is moving to gold-backed currency. They haven't announced it in those terms, but that's effectively where they're headed right now. That's why they opened the vaults in Riyadh and the vault in Hong Kong. That's why they want to enable countries to pay for their oil and energy and anything else they want in gold. And everybody is now turning slowly but surely, consistently towards the yuan because it has value. What does that say about the dollar? They're de-dollarizing. They're walking away from the dollar because the dollar doesn't appear in their minds to have long-term stability in terms of value.
And all of this is going to be exacerbated because you're talking about these economic costs that are starting to manifest. Now it's not theoretical. It's starting to happen right before our eyes at the time that Jack Kenney is wanting to go down the path that caused all of these problems to rise up where we are. He wants to double down on those. Well, let's take a look at what that's going to mean, because first of all, the Strait of Hormuz, even though the United States Central Command lies every day and saying that the Strait of Hormuz is open, we have very practical, concrete evidence that that's a complete lie. No, hardly anything is traveling through the Hormuz, especially on our path here. More concerning, especially if we go back into these strikes here, is on our Patriot expenditures. So we see that the Iranian side, despite all of our vaunted Patriot and bad air defense systems, whatever, most of the shots are getting through and they are precise hits by the Iranian side. Then when you look at those, this is really important here. This is going to tail into something you published recently. America is firing Patriot interceptors at more than 100 times faster than we can build them. 11 straight nights of American strikes, now 12. And Iranian missile drones still reach Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan. U.S. intelligence assessment reported by the Washington Post concluded that the bombing is unlikely to move Tehran at all. And then the underlying math is what matters. During the first 4 days of this war, coalition forces expended Patriot rounds at roughly 225 per day, while Lockheed's facility produces 1.7, consumption ratio of 132 to 1. And that immediately made me think of this piece that you've recently published on your Substack, Trump's war to the last missile. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about what that reveals based on some of the information we just posted?
Well, when I wrote this, I wrote it to get the point across to people that we could run out of missiles long before Iran does. In fact, we could end up not being able to provide any of our strategic partners or friends any missiles at all. We're already stripping out much of the world's missile inventories and shipping them to the Middle East. This is not going to end well for us. We're simply going to look impotent in the eyes of the world. And if you admit that your bombing strategy or your air and missile strategy isn't working, that you're not hitting the right targets, which is always the essence of the promise of success for air and missile campaigns, well, then it suggests that you're nearing the end of your inventory. And what do you do when you have no more missiles to fire? Harry Kazianis wrote a great piece where he tried to explain this. Now, when back in the early, at 2001, 2, 3, and 4, before I left the Army, I must tell you that there were people in Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, who were making the argument in private that they cannot surge. Now, during World War II, everybody says, well, look what we did during World War II. Well, the government poured in billions of dollars to help somebody like Henry Ford build this mile-long assembly line so that we could turn out thousands of aircraft very, very rapidly. And they perfected it, and they did it. We haven't had anything like that occur. In other words, there has been no focused investment to get the kind of surge capacity that you need if you fight. Now, the Russians realized they were in a difficult position back in 2022 when they moved into Ukraine, and they discovered, my God, this force is much larger and more dangerous than even we thought. And then they captured the plans and saw that they wanted to use that force against them in a place like Crimea, not just in Donetsk, Luhansk, and so forth. So what did they do? They focused their investment, they focused their attention, their manpower, everything on the scientific industrial base so that they could rapidly turn out the weapons and the missiles they need. And, you know, Alex Vershinin has written about this, about the criticality of an industrial base if you're going to fight an industrial war. And we're involved in an industrial war. But what we lost sight of was that it's a war of missiles and unmanned systems, specifically these relatively inexpensive Shahad drones and others. That's a little different from what we anticipated. We have satellites. We can build a similar ISR strike capability, but we don't have the vast numbers of missiles and drones that we need. But we do have a lot of other things. Unfortunately, a lot of the other things that we have aren't terribly useful. So this is not news, but it's a reality that we have to deal with. The smart thing to have done when we realized we were in this position was to get out of this and go home and get back on the drawing board, re-examine what we were doing, what we would need. But we didn't do that. Instead, we're doubling down on failure. And so you're going to get a double failure. You're going to get failure militarily, strategically in the Persian Gulf against Iran, matched by strategic failure at home, financially, economically. I can't think of a worse set of circumstances for any great power in the history of mankind.
And you know, Doug, it's also that reality, all these things you just be talking about are clearly evident to the Iranian side, because they have discovered that they could weather everything that we could throw at them for 40 days. They could weather this blockade, and now they're kind of weathering a combination of both, and they're able to succeed and hit us through it. And that kind of leads to some confident statements from like their foreign minister, Aragchi here, who says, listen, here's our current situation. This is as of yesterday afternoon. Any aggression against Iran, including our infrastructure, will compel a powerful and decisive response. Our defense doctrine is clear: an eye for an eye. Those who contribute to such aggression, whatever kind of support, will also be considered as legitimate targets. And of course, there he's talking about our regional allies. Now, when the Americans look at that, instead of coming to the conclusion you just did about, all right, all this stuff has failed, let's don't do that again. Let's do something different and reevaluate. Instead, Marco Rubio says, yeah, about his comments.
You know, guys, I saw Arachi, their foreign minister, who the other day say or something about their policies, an eye for an eye. The president's policy is a head for an eye. I mean, honestly, that's what it's going to be. I mean, they will pay a very heavy price for the things they're doing. They're already paying a very heavy price. You guys don't know it because you don't cover it. You're not in Iran. You're not in the street. They don't have a free media. But they're going to continue to pay a very heavy price. Their industrial base has been decimated. Their defense industrial base has been decimated. They're losing launchers. They're losing radars every single night. They are suffering billions of dollars in damage, and their economy is a disaster. But despite all that, okay, these people who are calling us every day, begging, let's do a deal. They send us messages through other countries, third countries. I mean, they're running out of countries to send. Even I had countries here coming up to me, oh, I just spoke to the Iranians. They want to do a deal. The problem is every time these people do a deal, they either break it, or after they make it, they want to change the deal.
Yeah, Doug, I don't think there's hardly anything he said that's accurate or true there. What do you make of it?
Well, the first thing is that as far as I can tell, no one in Iran is beating the drum for peace. I think if you look at the situation in Iran today, whatever opposition existed to the current regime is either suspended or vanished. The nation is united, and the political actors in the country are united in their opposition to any sort of arrangement with us that would end this war on any terms other than those that you saw in the 14 points. So those 14 points remain on the table. I don't see the Iranians backing off of that at all. So I think that's the first part. The second part is that if you have to tell the American people day after day after day after day that you are winning, and you argue, we've hit this many targets and we've destroyed this many buildings and so forth, what you're really telling the American people is this is endless. And Americans are beginning to say, if you have to tell us you're winning all the time, we're beginning to think you aren't. And I think that's already happening. People are saying, what are we winning? Yes, we're back to what's the objective? And the objective is Israel's desire to destroy Iran. Remember when we started this, we started with the notion that a little bit of regime change would provoke the resistance to stand up and overthrow the government. That went away fairly quickly. Having failed at that, what do we do next? Well, we're going to destroy their military capability. That hasn't worked. Their military capability is at least 70% of what it was before, and probably better, because they have some new weapons and new missiles they didn't have before. They continue to manufacture that material. And they have the backing of China and Russia, particularly China with its satellite connectivity, its communications, and so forth. So this is, if you have to keep saying this, it's not working. And I think that's pretty obvious. The bad news is this: we're trying to do two things at once. And this really began, I must say, under the Biden administration. This is not Trump's invention. The Biden administration started out backing this pointless and stupid and destructive war in Ukraine against Russia because it decided it was going to make the fight for the retention of American military, political, and financial hegemony in the world in Ukraine. That has failed. And then in the meantime, the war in the Middle East started up. And given its obligations to the Israel lobby and the people in the administration who are effectively agents for Israel, they had no choice but to join the war that Israel is waging on its neighbors. That then morphed into what we see today. Both wars are linked in that sense. We're not going to reverse the developments now. We're not going to stop Iran from being successful. We're not going to stop the Russians from crushing Ukraine. Those times are over. However, and this is something we got to address, and that is, if everything you do has failed, if there is nothing you can do with what you have on the table, there is a willingness to turn to something else, and that's where we go to a nuclear weapon. We're not going to use bioweapons. Bioweapons are simply uncontrollable. You have no real control over where those things go and what they do. Have as much damage to us as it will to any enemy. That's not going to be on the table. But the nuclear weapon is different. Israel has nuclear weapons, and Israel has made it very clear that it will use those if it feels it's necessary to do so. If everything else fails, I'm concerned that the Israelis will turn to something like that. And that, of course, changes everything.
Well, it does. And then I mean, you can't talk about the Russia-Ukraine war without being concerned about that on any number of fronts, possibly even ours, especially if things start going south. Marco Rubio was not just in the Middle East. He was also talking, I think, at that same forum in the Philippines. He was talking to Sergei Lavrov and talking about that. You talked about that there's no seeming movement to get out of that. Well, the official readout of that's very interesting. This is as of today. Merely says that they talked. They discussed U.S.-Russia relationships and the need to end the Russia-Ukraine war. But they didn't say anything about why. Media, on the other hand, is saying the U.S. is ready to help end the senseless war in Ukraine, but no quick deal is ahead, Rubio says. And then looking over on the Russian side, Dmitry Peskov said this about any hopes for a resolution in the near term.
In this situation, I wouldn't be overly optimistic. Contacts are indeed taking place. That is always positive. But one cannot speak of any new dynamics or acceleration right now. We continue our dialogue with the Americans through existing working channels, and we hope that when the American negotiators are freer, we will continue in-person communication. They will be able to come to Moscow and continue our dialogue.
But meanwhile, like Russia has always done, they're going to continue to fight. And the air war has really stepped up. It has now expanded into the sea world. There are a number of Russian ships that have been hit in the Sea of Azov, but Russia, as they always do, strikes back harder against shipping. And now a good portion of the port system in Odessa for Ukraine has been shut down because they can't endure that. And there's all kinds of strikes along the operational depths of the front line at the front line. Russia continues to move up. They have recently taken Konstantinivka. They're now moving up to Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, the last two fortress cities that are left there in the Donbass area, etc. And as you were telling me before that we came on the air here, there is another development tactically, or at least operationally, for the Russians on the battlefield. What is that?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, let's keep something in mind. Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran have all learned a very hard lesson with us. And that is that you cannot believe anything President Trump says or anything that anyone in his administration says. That's where we are right now. So there can be no arrangement, no agreement of any kind with Russia at this point on Ukraine. How many times do you meet and how many times do you listen to Donald Trump say, well, I'll do this and we'll do that and we'll hammer this out and we'll put an end to this, only to discover that he goes home, he does a 180-degree turn and does the opposite of what was said. This happened in Alaska. I think Alaska was the last serious attempt to try and reach some sort of agreement, and they've given up. That they'll be happy to talk to us or at least sit there and listen to us bloviate, but nobody trusts us. And that's very bad, because if nobody trusts us in the Middle East and nobody trusts us in Eastern Europe, you're not going to get any financiers or lenders to go back into these areas to rebuild anything, to reconstruct anything, because they don't trust anything we say, specifically when it comes to ending the conflict. They're afraid that if they go in and do anything, the next week Donald Trump will decide, well, I'm renewing the bombing campaign because I don't like X, Y, and Z. We're in a very difficult position there. Now, this man, General Surovikin, is not well known to many in the West. He should be. He's a very intelligent man, very sharp. He was instrumental in putting together the larger strategic response in Ukraine to the Ukrainian threat once they consolidated control over most of what they were initially interested in, those Russian-speaking areas. He's an Air Force officer. He understands all of the various strike systems and how to use them, how to orchestrate them. He understands the criticality of those links from intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance in the air and in space to all of those weapons platforms. He understands that we are in a world today where the strikes shape the battlefield for ground forces. In other words, the ground force doesn't wait for the strikes to lift and then move. The strikes are much more profound, much more influential. He is part of the group that has felt for some time that the war has gone too slowly, that it is being too cautious. He was harmed because of his public statements supporting Prigozhin. People will forget Prigozhin. He was the one that led this whole charge to Moscow, trying to get President Putin's attention. He's now gone the way of the buffalo. And Surovikin was punished by being sent to Africa, where he's done excellent work for the Russians in Africa. What I'm trying to say is that this is a very different personality with a different view of the battlefield and how to do things. I expect he's going to have a significant impact. And he is going to definitely finish the job up in Kharkov. And I think we will then see movement towards Odessa. And eventually, I think we will see the Ukrainians cleared completely from the area of Ukraine east of the Dnieper River. I'd be surprised if that didn't happen before long. This is not somebody who is uncertain, undecided, or what I would call extremely cautious. Quite the opposite. Now,
I wonder if you can address a little bit to kind of give us an idea of how his generalship compares to what the West is, because he's not overly cautious, but he is. It appears anyway, from what he did while he was actually actively involved, is that he is patient. Though, for example, he took decisions that nobody else in the West or Ukraine would do in 2022. When he made a calculation that to try and hold the city of Kherson, which Russian had at the time, it was going to be too costly. So he withdrew from the city, moved back across the Dnieper River, blew the 4 bridges, and that basically stopped the Ukrainians. They never went beyond that. Meanwhile, he set up these 5, what they ended up calling the 5 Surovikin lines of the defense, which were completely successful at breaking the teeth of the 2023 attack from the Ukrainian side. And no, we can just be left to wonder what would have happened if he had remained in because of the Prigozhin affair. He went out. Now that he's back, what does his previous attacks tell you about what he may do next?
Well, first of all, you're right. He made the correct assessment to let us and our Ukrainian proxy overreach. We overreached. 1 million casualties resulted. Hundreds of thousands of lives were lost pointlessly. Think of what happened after Kursk, because when you describe Kursk, Kursk was set up initially over the objections of Stalin. Stalin wanted to attack. That's something he had in common with Hitler. They were both obsessed with attacking each other. And he was talked out of it. And I wrote a chapter in the book Margin of Victory about it, which people might want to glance at. If you look at what happened at Kursk, that's what happened to the Ukrainians. Instead of Germans, it happened to Ukrainians. Now, what you're going to see is what happened after Kursk. And what was that? Well, they moved west, but they're not going to move west the way they did initially after the fall of Stalingrad. And they're not going to move west after Kursk the way they did exactly during World War II. It'll be much more deliberate, much more methodical, but it will be devastating. And you will see an integration of air and missile power with ground combat power on a scale that you have not seen yet. That's the best I can do.
Well, that's what most in the West don't believe is even possible. In fact, many people that I've queried here in Washington, D.C. just think that, no, what we've seen Russia do since 2023, since that offensive failed and taking so-called 1.5%, whatever it's been, that's because that's all they can do, and that's all they'll ever do. So this is basically a frozen conflict. It's a stalemate, and yeah, there's lots of contact along the line, but it's not going to ever go anywhere. So we can just take our time. As a matter of fact, we saw just I guess earlier this week an announcement that Germany and UK are consorting to have this new missile defense capacity, a missile offensive capacity, to where they'll create longer range missiles for use by Ukraine into Russia up to the year 2034 is before all that stuff's going to come out. But they're thinking long term that the war is just going to continue grinding on until later on they're going to be able to hit Russia even harder. What do you think about what that number one, will that work from the European side? And secondly, whether it does or not, what is the message to Russia today that they're moving that direction?
Well, remember, you had large numbers of people that told everyone Iran will fall apart, it'll collapse after 3 or 4 days. In fact, if you go back through many of General Keene's interviews and others, they dismissed it out of hand and said, well, this will be over in a few days. Then it was a week, then it was 2 weeks. And then suddenly it was, well, this is going to take longer. Now people in Washington, believe it or not, are talking about a stalemate that could last into next year. Now, I don't see that occurring for the reasons we've already discussed. I think it'll break down before then. But this is Washington, D.C. It's a bubble. People do not live in the world of reality. They live in a fantasy world. And that fantasy world extends to Russia. Russia is still, in their minds, something that it is not, a backward, developing country that can't possibly compete with a Western military power like the United States. And when it comes to Britain and France, they are dangerously out of touch with reality. Not only can they not build any sort of air and missile defense in any time that would make any difference, that takes years and an enormous investment. And it won't work until we break the laws of fractal mathematics and relate light, gravity, and magnetism, frankly. You can create point defense and clusters, but you're not going to defend vast territories. So that's one problem. Now they want to give more weapons to Ukraine. And I think there is a real risk of two things happening. First of all, I think with Surovikin there, it may be very hard to get those missiles into the country. I think you're going to see bridges over the Dnieper, rail lines, communications lines, all destroyed, that unto now have been untouched. And we can go into, in some future point in time, what the thinking was in Moscow that left those things intact. But I think he'll go after those with a vengeance. And then the other thing is they have built up these Oreshnik missiles with conventional munitions. And I think they're prepared to use them if they have to against NATO states that are hosting construction factories, whatever you want to call them, sites for missiles. I think that's their last option, but it's real, and we shouldn't dismiss it, and we should be concerned about it.
You know, I know we're about running out of time here. So the one last thing I want to ask you about, you mentioned how there's a lot of fantastic thinking and just disconnected from reality. I think I've got a really good example here of, I'd like your view here. This is General Keith Kellogg, former National Security Advisor for the Vice President of the United States, former envoy by President Trump to Ukraine. So a key guy, somebody he listens to. He's on Fox News all the time. Here he is giving his sage wisdom on how the war in Iran can be won, and he likens it to a football game.
Here is a concern I do have for Iran, though. You have played sports, I've played sports, and you let a team hang around, a baseball team in the ninth inning or a football team in the fourth quarter, where you were clearly the better team. You should have closed them out in the first quarter, not the fourth, or the first inning, not the ninth inning. And the longer they stick around, the more dangerous they become. And that's kind of where we're at right now. And I think the president's going to close it out. He should close it out.
Yeah, I mean, that's true in sports. We see that all the time. But is that analogy applicable here to the war in the Ukraine and Iran?
Well, Dan, Keith is a nice guy. But like most of the general officers, he lives in the past. He's made statements similar to what Lindsey Graham said when he was alive. Take Carg Island and you win the war. That's why, unfortunately, I think ground operations are not yet off the table. There's no evidence that taking Carg Island is going to make any difference at all, other than kill large numbers of American soldiers and Marines who go there. The same thing is true if you try to land and take Chabahar, or you're going to try and take islands closer to Bandar Abbas. It's not going to change anything. You're essentially bringing targets to bear for the Iranians to destroy, and the Iranians will welcome that opportunity. But the football business is very typical. If you wanted to get the general to get on side for some project, if you wanted to flatter his ego, you'd talk about football and the Army team. And remember what, I mean, it was ridiculous. And that's the level of discourse, unfortunately, in the senior ranks. We need to do a lot better. We would be better off with people like Admiral Bill Owens and Art Zabrowski and others who were very serious thinkers who were struggling with all of these issues back in the 90s that have now come back to haunt us.
Yeah, and we could add you to that list because you were publishing book after book, like the Margin of Victory we showed.
Donald Trump is panicking as Iran has rejected Donald Trump's ceasefire request. Donald Trump sent Iraq's Prime Minister, Ali al-Zaidi, to meet with Iran's President Pezeshkian and Foreign Minister. Trump was begging for a ceasefire. Iran said absolutely not. The New York Times is also confirming this. Iran on Thursday rejected a ceasefire proposal from Donald Trump that was carried to Tehran by the Iraqi prime minister, according to both Iranian and Iraqi officials. This has separately been confirmed by U.S. officials. The failed mediation effort came as Donald Trump is now threatening to escalate the war even more. This is happening at the same time the markets tanked today. Oil is now over $100 per barrel, crude that is. The 10-year, 20-year, 30-year Treasury note yields are at record highs. Mortgage rates are soaring. The price per gallon of gas, as you know, is surging. Very difficult, catastrophic economic situation here. So Donald Trump sent the Iraqi prime minister, who was in Iran today, to beg for a ceasefire, and Iran said, nope. We've got Trump in the United States. right where we want them. We want them to pay. They pulled out of the memorandum of understanding. We have no interest in doing a deal with them. We don't trust them. Iran's foreign minister, Araghchi, says that Iran and the U.S. already had enough mediators. We don't need a new one in the Iraqi prime minister. The problem is not the passing of messages, says Iranian foreign minister Araghchi. The problem is America's outlook, which is illogical, greedy, and controlling. Two Iranian officials say Iran is preparing to expand the war significantly if Donald Trump strikes critical infrastructure. The United States indeed launched its 13th consecutive night of strikes this evening after Iran rejected Donald Trump begging for a ceasefire. The strikes were significant. However, it was not as big as the night before, which is interesting. A lot of people are saying that the U.S. is running out of munitions right now, that Donald Trump and Hegseth have handled this, or I should say mishandled this so much that they don't even have the ability to escalate that much any further at this point. But there were some serious strikes. I don't want to downplay the severity of it. Let me share with you this attack on the Avaz area, which is Iran's main oil region. There was about 35 strikes in the past hour and a half. This just occurred. Avaz is the capital of the Khuzestan province, housing Iran's major oil production and refining infrastructure. And so I'll show you what went down when one of the innocent civilians there captured the following. Let's play it. This is what the air defense system looked like in Western Tehran, which the Trump regime says they don't have any air defense system. Let me show you what it looks like as the U.S. was sending fighter jets over Iran. Let's play this clip. Notably, this footage has been circulating of a crashing and burning aerial object flowing from the sky over Keshem Island in southern Iran, with initial reports that Iran struck some sort of jet. It may be an MQ-9 Reaper. I'll show you the clip. Tell me if you recognize what this is. Let's play it. Now, this also comes at a time where dozens of United States Air Force cargo planes, C-17s, and other heavy lifts can be seen flying from European bases to the Middle East today. There's a full-scale air bridge reactivated right now, which hasn't been seen since the beginning of this catastrophic war. Should also be noted that on Thursday, the Defense Department is now deleting the killed in action and injured in action numbers from the website. We've been talking about this now, in our reports about 3 or 4 days ago. We said they're deleting the casualty numbers. I see them manipulating the casualty numbers on their web. I saw them deleting it. They were deleting it. So they downgraded the killed in action from 18 to 14, and they reduced the injured in action by 20 as well, because the Trump regime is saying that the recent deaths did not take place during Epic Fury, that Trump did a ceasefire, so Epic Fury ended, and that was a different war, and that this is something else right now. So they're deleting the killed in action numbers, and this follows Donald Trump at Dover, Delaware, where Donald Trump said that he lied, and which what else is new? But he said that the troops who were killed, that their final words before dying basically was that they didn't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. I mean, how sick and disgusting for Donald Trump to just make stuff up about service members who got killed in action. Now, Iranian sources are also claiming that Iran destroyed U.S. HIMARS, those missiles that they shoot from the ground in northern Kuwait. You can see some footage right here as well. Iran currently is conducting strikes over Kuwait and Jordan. We know that's taking place as I am recording this. According to an exclusive report today from CBS, citing U.S. officials who spoke on a condition of anonymity, the rate at which the United States is expending some of its most advanced air defense interceptors and precision-guided weapons in the Middle East is a point of great tension inside the Trump regime. Dwindling stockpiles of defensive interceptors and long-range missiles, including stocks of the Army tactical missile system, the ATACMS, as they're called, have become a major pressure point for top military officials. And we're running out of munitions. The strategic reserves have hit tank bottom. Crude likely will hit $120, $150 a barrel pretty soon. It's already over $100 a barrel. Iran knows they've got the United States right where they want them. I mean, earlier today, MB Ghalibaf, Iran's parliament leader, was mocking Donald Trump, saying, 10 of 10 move, Donald. Right now, we're watching your gas prices surge. We're watching your interest rates rise. We're watching your markets crash. Well done, Donald. At the same time, Donald Trump asked the Iraqi prime minister to beg Iran for a deal. I mean, again, how pathetic is it that that's what Donald Trump is doing, especially Donald Trump? They want to make a deal so badly. Trump posted the following recently. Please let this statement serve to represent, this is what he just posted. Please let this statement serve to represent until further notice that from this point forth, any and all damages done to ships, cargo, or anything related thereto will be paid for by Iranian money that the United States has in its possession and controls. These damages may be very substantial, but nevertheless, this is the fair and equitable thing to do. Thank you for your attention to this matter, Donald J. Trump. Didn't you say that if Iran strikes tankers, that all hell will break loose or something like that, or that you'll unleash hell on them and that you will blow up their bridges and power plants? And so now you're saying you're going to take their money, as this Just Dario account explains. Trump must have forgot that he promised that the money would have been spent by Iran to buy wheat, corn, soybeans, and other produce from U.S. farmers because the country was starving. Logically speaking, U.S. farmers won't see much of that money anymore, while Iran doesn't care. Satellite images are currently showing that Iran has built back its infrastructure fast after the Trump destruction. Iran repaired a bridge that Israel struck with 3 bombs within days, surprising Israeli officials and prompting them to question the effectiveness of their targeting at the beginning of the war. And now you see Iran, Trump destroy something, they build it back right away. And while they're focusing on executing a very tactical plan, Donald Trump is doing his deranged, whatever you want to call it, where he's speaking in Georgia and all these places, doing his YMCA dance. It is so utterly weird. More satellite surveillance photos showing U.S. military housing structures that were destroyed recently, so you can see for yourself. But Trump claimed today Iran really wants to make a deal. They're begging for a deal. When Donald Trump said this, what we didn't know at this time, although we knew that he was desperate, that he sent the Iraqi prime minister to ask for a ceasefire and Iran was rejecting it. Here's what Trump said. You can hear it for yourself. This is what he said earlier. So utterly pathetic. Let's play it.
We're doing very well against the Islamic Republic of Iran. We're doing extremely well. They would like to do something, but I say they're not ready yet. They need more of the same. They're not ready yet. They got some evil intentions. We cannot let them have a nuclear weapon. If we did all this that I'm talking about your data centers, isn't that important? When they start blowing away communities one by one, we cannot let them ever even think about having a nuclear weapon. And that's exactly what's happening. They'll never have a nuclear weapon.
Earlier today, Marco Rubio, when he was at the ASEAN conference in South Asia, Rubio's like, Iran's begging us for deals every day. They really want to do a deal so badly. They beg us all of the time. Here, play this clip.
Okay, these people who are calling us every day, begging, let's do a deal. They send us messages through other countries, third countries. I mean, they're running out of countries to send. Even I had countries here coming up to me. Oh, I just spoke to the Iranians. They want to do a deal. The problem is every time these people do a deal, they either break it or after they make it, they want to change the deal. So they're probably not ready to do a deal yet, but they will be soon.
Notably, Rubio was talking about the Trump regime, that now the Trump regime has gone to another mediator, Iraq. I guess Qatar doesn't want anything to do with this anymore. Pakistan can't do anything. You know why Pakistan has a defense treaty with Saudi Arabia at this point. So Pakistan has been neutered as a mediator. They're gone. Qatar doesn't really want to be involved anymore because they realize that they want to try to figure out how they could work with Iran more closely so Iran doesn't blow up the oil field there if the United States blows up Iranian infrastructure. So Qatar is worried about, its oil fields right now. They're freaking out. So Donald Trump goes to the Iraqi guy who Trump was saying was good looking and had that guy try to deliver the ceasefire. And if you know this Iraqi prime minister, he was a compromise pick that the U.S. really wanted in there, and the U.S. thought they could manipulate. Iran thinks that they can manipulate him. Al-Maliki, the guy who Iran wants, was pushed aside by the United States. So Iran doesn't really trust this guy in Iraq, but he is still someone who, saw the millions of people show up in Iraq and how powerful the Shiite community is in Iraq. So Donald Trump tried to get that guy, but that guy is weak. I mean, I think everybody knows al-Zaidi, is not strong. But Trump sent al-Zaidi, and al-Zaidi was not able to do it. I mean, again, how utterly embarrassing. And now on state regime media, which calls itself Fox, they're out there talking about war crimes that they want to commit. What should Trump hit first? Should we take out the nuclear plant? Or should we take out that power grid? Well, if we take out that power grid, 40% of electricity gets cut off to Tehran. And if we take out the nuclear power plant, that could be bad for what do you mean it could be bad? Like Chernobyl bad? Yeah, like you're going to blow up a nuclear power plant and lead to cataclysmic nuclear annihilation of the world. You're going to blow up the nuclear power plant? Y'all are crazy people. This is literally there on Fox, which I'm about to show you. They're hypothesizing if Trump should destroy and blow up a nuclear power plant for civilian use, that will literally result in a situation that would be nuclear annihilation. Here, play this clip.
All right, so let's take a look at the power plants and places that we might be able to hit. Lucas, as you see these as targets, what do you think we might hit first?
Well, I don't know if we'll hit it first, but the Damavad plant supplies 40% of Tehran's electricity. The Bashir nuclear power plant, probably not likely a target. The Russians built this. They still supply Iran with low enriched uranium.
Because, Lucas, we should say there's a risk to blowing up a nuclear plant.
There's no question. Now, the South Pars gas field, this sits on the largest natural gas field in the world. Israeli forces hit this on March 18th in the beginning of the war. Iran responded by hitting the Qatari side of this natural gas field. In terms of targets.
But let me ask you here, this is the Strait.
Yeah, this is the Strait.
So if we want to send a message in the Strait where they're hitting ships in the Strait, wouldn't that be a place we go?
It would. The only question is what would be Iran's response? We've seen Iran hit back in Qatar's oil field, natural gas oil fields in the UAE. That's the big thing.
You mean they'll have a like response? If we hit a power plant,
no question. That's been this tit for tat the whole time. That's what's notable about the Israelis. They use disproportionate responses. Probably one of the reasons that Israel hasn't re-entered the war. Iran has not attacked Israel since early June.
And your assessment of how we're doing it now, do you think we're doing disproportionate, or do you think we could be doing
not doing disproportionate? It is notable that U.S. forces hit an Iranian barracks after an American barracks was hit, of course, in Jordan. That's what killed those three U.S. Army
so
soldiers.
This is the power plants that we could be hitting.
This is the big one.
It'd be like Chernobyl on steroids. So Marco Rubio leaves by saying, I hear that Araghchi, Iran's foreign minister, wants an eye for an eye. I want their head for an eye. Hey, you're out of munitions, idiot. You're a loser. And you have brought the United States into a catastrophic war that the U.S. is losing. You loser. It's a regime of losers. And now you're begging for ceasefires while acting tough. Iran knows how desperate you are behind the scenes. who's your audience? The 30% of MAGA that still supports this crap? Who is this directed to? Because the whole international community knows Rubio and Trump and Hegseth and this whole clown show regime is weak and pathetic and desperate. And you could claim all you want that Iran is begging for this. They know the reality. They know how pathetic it looks when you're up there saying this crap. Here, play this clip.
I think I saw, guys, I saw Arachi, their foreign minister, who the other day say or something about their policies, an eye for an eye. The president's policy is a head for an eye. I mean, honestly, that's what it's going to be. I mean, they will pay a very heavy price for the things they're doing. They're already paying a very heavy price. You guys don't know it because you don't cover it. You're not in Iran. You're not in the street. They don't have a free media. But they're going to continue to pay a very heavy price. Their industrial base has been decimated. Their defense industrial base has been decimated. They're losing launchers. They're losing radars every single night.
There you have it, everybody. Let me know what you think. You got a copy of WTF America? Get your copy of pre-order it now if you can. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Breaking news right now. My brothers and I wrote a book. It's called WTF America. And well, doesn't that just say it all?
Coffee. Follow me.